Hello, and thanks for joining us on Press Party here at Suffolk University's Studio 73. I'm your host, Katie Eastman. News organizations have been covering a story without the what, the why, the where. How do we cover the missing Malaysian aircraft with almost no information? A sex offender won $10 million from the state lottery. That was 6 years ago. He's back in the news now, and we'll talk why the media never followed up. Sad news from Seattle, Washington this week. A news helicopter crashed and the men aboard died. But it's what one Denver station aired during their crash coverage that caused a very awkward moment. We'll get to those topics soon, but first let's meet our panel. We have Dr. Bob Rosenthal. He's the Chair of Communication and Journalism here at Suffolk University. Multimedia journalist from the Boston Herald, Erica Mora, joins us. And we have Matt O'Malley. He's a Boston City Councilor joining us for the first time, so welcome. For our first topic, where is that plane? It's the question the media will keep asking until the missing Malaysian jetliner is found. For almost 2 weeks, every local and national outlet has nibbled around the story, from a possible hijacking to a fire in the cockpit. Where did Flight 370 go, and how did it disappear?
Breaking developments in the mystery of Flight 370.
For almost 2 weeks, the lead story in every newscast is the missing Malaysian flight. 239 people aboard from Kuala Lumpur to Beijing all disappeared without one word of distress from the pilot.
It did stay in the air much longer than we thought.
It's a media heyday for cable news networks who have far more questions than answers. But through these questions, we've learned so much.
Interpol database isn't often checked.
Even if the people with stolen passports aren't connected to the reason the plane went missing, because journalists asked why, we now know that fewer than 20 Interpols cross-check their databases, which brings up a huge lapse in global airline security.
But again, that's just total speculation.
And there's been so much speculation.
We seem to be...
And although the montages of CNN speculation make them look silly, the reporting hasn't crossed into conspiracies or theories of the absurd.
Everything is speculation, although it is informed speculation.
But how long will this story take up the 24-hour news cycle, answering all the questions?
All right, so before we talk about the coverage of this, I want to just nail down a few of the facts, what we do know, because there is some information out there. And in fact, we just learned on Thursday morning, they're now looking for debris in the Indian Ocean that may have come from the plane. But we do know that around 26 minutes after the plane left the Malaysian capital towards Beijing, they lost communication with them, and that wasn't the end of it. It flew for hundreds of thousands of miles after that, around a little over 6 hours. And that destination was programmed in before the pilot of the plane calmly said goodnight. And now that's almost where we end. We're just like pulling at strings. How long can we cover something without knowing all of this information? Dr. Babar, is it too much coverage, or do we have to ask all these
when
questions?
290 some odd people disappear off the face of the earth in this day and age with all of our technology, it's a big story. And also, ironically, it's a little bit like that show Lost. In some ways.
It still could be.
Yes.
Luckily the news hasn't focused on those absurd theories. We're not hearing, oh, is this Lost? Which is great, because sometimes it can drag into that, but we haven't heard that.
No, and that's a good thing, as you point out. But they're still treating it as a very serious news story, as it should. I mean, this is something that has gripped nations all around the world. When you go into any bar, any restaurant here at noontime, and this is going to be part of the topic of conversation, probably even more than the NCAA basketball tournament, which is starting today. So it's a huge global story, precisely because it's a mystery.
Yeah. Matt, have you talked to city councilors about this? Is this
absolutely
on the table?
Doctor's point, it's all anyone is talking about. And I think it's a couple pieces here. Is one, it was a tragedy. There are 240 or however many folks that we don't know what happened, presumably are dead, but we just don't know. I also think that unlike other worldwide media events, there is so much uncertainty about this issue. So it's not as though it's a terrorist event where you would have a terrorist expert come in, or a natural disaster where some geologist would come in and talk about
we have all of those experts coming in
That's exactly
to say that instead.
Yeah. And I think your point is correct. The media, I think, has been mostly responsible, but there have been some of these conspiracy theories and aliens that have been given equal weight with something as sort of banal as a mechanical failure or fire on the plane. So I think the media, some networks have been better than others in terms of ferreting out some of the more outlandish theories, but it has certainly captivated the world's attention because it is such an inconceivable situation.
Right, Erica, you saw the whole montage of CNN saying like speculation, over and over and over. It's easy to put one of those montages together, so that's kind of unfair, but do you think that they're just loving this and just saying, well, it might be this, it might be that?
Yeah, I think that in this case, I completely agree with everyone on the panel that it is a really important story to get out there. Over 200 people are missing at this point, and we just don't know, and how can we not know in this age? You're completely right. But I do think that the media has to be very careful, because speculation, I mean, there's endless speculation, endless experts that you can have. And quite frankly, great, experts have a little bit more knowledge on the matter, but what do they really know? They're really not on those search helicopters trying to find. They're probably not talking to any of the agencies that are looking specifically for the plane and any debris. So we really have to be careful that when we're presenting speculation, we're not presenting it as this is a fact or this is possibly a fact. You know, it's not proven theories. This isn't science. None of
Which
these
is
theories
exactly
are
what they're
proven.
saying. They're saying before we talk about this, none of this might be true. And we might just totally be. So it's a lot of filler, and and so CNN is filling that up every hour of the day.
And you can't blame them, right? Because this is, I mean, you're talking about it and you're a Boston City Councilor. You're probably not planning a trip to Asia anytime soon, and I'm not planning a trip to Asia anytime soon, but I can't help but talk about it. So I get it. It's a very well talked about topic. So I get why they want to keep talking about it, to keep people tuned in, but the media has to be very careful.
Yeah, and to your point, there's so little information out there. So for example, the debris that they've found in the Indian Ocean off of the coast of Australia, 1,500 miles or so, that could easily have dropped off of a large container ship, because there's an 80-foot piece supposedly, and I heard one expert this morning on the radio say, well, there wouldn't be an 80-foot piece of a plane that broke up, probably. So this could easily have, or it could be a piece of a plane, or a piece of a cargo container that fell off a ship. You never know.
And also, too, I think that sort of is where it's, part of the great thing about this job that I love so much is that you're constantly learning, and there's all of these little things that kind of tantalize your senses, and it's like, oh my gosh, ABC was probably the first ever media to go on a search helicopter like that. They were, their cell phones were confiscated before they went on, because there's all of this like very, very confidential technology that's on the plane. So it's very hard as a reporter to not get excited about all of these things and present it in your stand-up as, oh my gosh, guys, this happened, and then this happened, and this is crazy. And we just need to calm down a little bit, I think.
But we are learning a lot more still. Like, there are things.
Absolutely.
What were you going to say?
Just another aspect which the media is focusing more so now, which is important, is that 25 nations from around the world are working together in this in some aspect. And these are countries that often wouldn't necessarily be allies. And the other piece of that is that Malaysia is rightfully being criticized for their initial reaction, the fact that they, many family members of these victims have voiced sincere frustration because they haven't been able to get the information and work as well together. So, it's that I think is an important part of this narrative and this story, and it's nice to see some reporting and hopefully, what little good can come from such a tragedy.
I will say, though, the one negative thing is it's taken some of the focus off of what's happening in Crimea.
Exactly, and a lot of different uprisings. There was an article about that. Like, look this involves 240 people, and yes, it's a tragedy, but all of these other uprisings in other countries involve millions of people.
Sure.
So,
and
how do
Israel
we
just
weigh
fired
that?
on the Golan Heights on a Syrian unit who had fired on Israel, for example. So what's going to happen there? And frankly, those situations have a much greater impact on all of us than 200 some odd missing people, even though tragic though that is.
And we can present facts, like actual facts about those things, And that's just a frustration too, that this is tantalizing for so many people, yet what's going on, let's say in Venezuela, people are just not paying attention to it. So I agree it should be covered, but it needs to be weighed as the rest of all news needs to be weighed. So.
Well, thank you guys so much for weighing in. Thank you to you for watching. Now it's our viewers' turn. Too much speculation in the media? Give us your theory. Up next, a sex offender offends again, but he's also getting $10 million from the state. Stay tuned. Thanks for joining us here at Studio 73. I'm your host, Katie Eastman. Should sex offenders be able to win the lottery? It's a question the Boston Herald asked in 2008, but Erica Mora explains why we're asking this question all over again.
A Massachusetts state lottery winner is now behind bars.
Daniel Snee has been charged with alleged sex crimes involving minors.
62-year-old Daniel Snee has made headlines all week, but it's not the first time we've heard of him. 6 years ago, the Boston Herald reported the Level 3 sex offender won a $10 million lottery prize.
Said police believe that prize money aided in his latest crimes.
At the time, no legislation was in place to stop Snee from getting his winnings, and there wasn't really a follow-up story. Fast forward to today, with all the media coverage since Snee's arraignment, State Treasurer Steve Grossman is now looking to create a policy that could potentially bar criminals from winning the lottery.
I'm simply saying, what can we do now, moving forward? What can we do to intercept funds legally, constitutionally?
While Grossman is hopeful a solution can be found, there's no word on when we can expect it. For Press Party, I'm Erica Mora.
Okay, so first reported in 2008, and then there wasn't any talk about it since then. Should there have been talk about it? Should people have followed up and said, is this still something we should look at, even though he hadn't offended again? Do you think?
Well, you know, when I saw the Herald headline, it was another reminder of how unfair life can be sometimes. You think of how many good people who that money would have changed their lives, and then this monster wins it. You know, it's unclear as to what exactly the law could or could not do, or what a proposed law could do. You know, perhaps this would open the conversation in terms of restitution that this individual could pay to his initial victims in the 1970s, as well as the latest alleged victim. But one thing that caught my eye in that article was that he had apparently failed to register as a sex offender and was fined, I think it was $100. I mean, maybe that's the conversation we should have about increasing the civil penalties for not registering when you're supposed to.
Mm-hmm. That's a good idea. You looked into this story a lot. What was your take on it? What did you come out saying?
I think it's a really hard topic because you hear about this and you hear about him, you know, offending again and buying expensive gifts to lure minors in, and allegedly, again, this is all allegedly, he used part of that money that he won from the lottery to buy these expensive gifts. Right. So it's so easy to stereotype and just say, well, that's it. Just no criminals. Like, this is obviously a bad idea. This is obviously going to happen every single time. You obviously can't think that way. You know, I mean, very, very simple comparison, but
you can't put a blanket.
Right.
Nobody with a criminal record can win the lottery, because that's unfair. There are lots of people who do their time and come out a better person and are great people.
Right.
You can't.
Exactly.
Yeah, you can't have a morals clause to buy a lottery ticket. You know, it just doesn't work that way. And even in this instance, you could say what good can come out of it is perhaps a lawsuit now from one of the alleged victims' families or themselves, and now there's something to get. A prize at the end of this thing. He would have to pay off some this thing. So juries can kind of do that. But this is not a point where we ought to pass a law that says, for one thing, the odds are infinitesimal that anyone wins a lottery prize, particularly a prize as large as $10 million, as opposed to a couple bucks on a scratch ticket.
Right. How often
so what
would
are the
we
chances of
actually
another
be
felon,
dealing with this?
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Will another felon win a lottery? And I know, quote unquote, Whitey Bulger supposedly won the lottery, but that wasn't really winning the lottery. He forced someone to give him his lottery ticket. You know. So.
But is the media at fault for not talking about this in the 6 years?
But what's the purpose of talking about it? Now we think of this as a news story. Initially, news is supposed to be something that has an impact on people's lives, right? You know, at least in good part. While this is an interesting story from, you know, because life is not fair, as you pointed out, but there's the news value of the story isn't really the same thing as it would be if it would be better if he had won and then decided to give the money to his victims or alleged victims or something of that nature, then it actually has more news value than the fact that he actually won the lottery. It's just, there's nothing to it.
If the fact that he didn't reoffend for 6 years, or we just didn't know about it, isn't news. Like we shouldn't have been reporting based on nothing and just to keep saying, a criminal won the lottery. There wouldn't be news.
I actually think that it would have been interesting to follow up with him, because I think so many of us, when we see somebody coming out of prison or jail or the correctional system, there's this hope, at least for me, there's this hope that they are going to turn their life around and to do something good, and it's really difficult to do that. Right? It's very, very difficult coming out of the correctional system and making a difference in this world. So I think it would have been interesting if a year later the Herald had gone back and said, hey, we want to do a follow-up story, or any media outlet. We want to do a follow-up story and see how you're doing post getting out and then winning all this money.
I can't see a reporter doing that. We're just checking in on you. I know you're a convicted sex offender. We're wondering how you are.
But I mean, but we should. I mean, we talk about this all the time in the media, how it's an unfair system for people coming out of prison or jail. We talk about it constantly. Yeah. And when we criticize somebody or criticize a system for then giving this guy $10 million that he rightfully won, so we criticize, yet we don't go back and say, you know what, we want to check on how you're doing. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't do that for a couple of people that come out of prison, or check up on them to talk about that, because that system is also unfair and that system is also broken, in my opinion. Mm-hmm. Again, I don't know if media people tried to do that and just were turned away, as I'm sure he might have turned us away anyways, but I mean, why not? Why not do the follow-up? I think it would be interesting.
Yeah, well, the bigger story, I think, here in terms of a follow-up is the fact that obviously jail and whatever treatment he received was ineffective.
Right, exactly.
Right? At least allegedly
you can argue
ineffective.
For many people. Jail doesn't seem to put you back on your feet.
Right.
It's
jail has become pure punishment. There's very little
rehabilitation. A whole other topic we can go off on.
That's a different press topic.
Right,
but
it is.
Yeah.
It'd be a juicy one.
So what do we do? What's the final say? How? I guess do we continue to cover this to push lawmakers to do something, or do we just leave it at this and say this is what happened?
To do something?
Yeah. What would you think?
It's again, you read the headline and or at least me, and I'm sure many people here and people watching, your blood boiled. It was so unfair. With this particular case, because this is such a unique situation. I mean, it is so rare to win the lottery, period. I would hope, I'm not a lawyer, but I would hope that the victims, the alleged victims, were to bring something in a civil suit and try to get restitution. It seems to me that that's the avenue. But I think the topics discussed about the corrections facility and follow-up, making sure, not necessarily, to check in the media's role, but to make sure that we have the tools and resources for our folks transitioning back into society so that they don't reoffend. It's making sure that we have partnerships with our probation and DA's office and Sheriff's Department, as well as the state DOC. This guy is a monster, and it's a sad story all around, particularly that he offended again.
Yeah, very true. Well, thank you guys so much. Thank you to you for watching. Keep the debate going by making a comment on our Press Party chat. Stay tuned for our Media Fail of the Week. Welcome back to Press Party. First, I want to extend our deepest sympathies to Seattle. It's not often American journalists die in our own country, but 2 men were killed in a fiery crash while taking off in a news helicopter on Tuesday morning. Como News photographer Bill Stratham and pilot Gary Fitzner will be missed by the storytelling community. Unfortunately, our media fail comes from coverage of this tragic event. The Fox affiliate in Denver was showing Twitter pictures of the crash. Take a look here. They're scrolling through and some weird things popped up. First you see the pictures of the crash here, then you see this picture, then a picture of an omelet, and that was a picture of a penis. I can't believe I just said that on air. And obviously that is their reaction, just complete embarrassing, awkward. What do you do after something like that pops up on air? I don't know how to react. I don't know how I would react.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, clearly, they reacted somewhat in shock. It's hard to be funny given the context of the story in which this gaffe happened. It would be interesting to find out how it happened.
Yeah, what was weird is they had these bizarre pictures before that. So I was like, why didn't you just cut out, I mean, they went very fast, but just cut out the second you see the weird picture of a person and then an omelet and then
just very strange. As a producer losing their job this morning.
And these things happen so often. We're constantly talking about these. Like,
Again, it's the media. It's that tantalizing, the sizzle. It's gotta get it up. We gotta talk about this now. And they just didn't think. I mean, you saw a picture of Edward Scissorhands.
Like, that was Edward Scissorhands.
Yeah.
I was like, that looks familiar.
Yeah, Edward Scissorhands. Like, how do you not cut? Like, how can you not think of that as a bad omen of what's to come? Like,
just
the next
go,
pictures,
just get out of there.
Yeah,
I think it showed the perils of citizen journalism, or the potential perils. I assume that was
those were other people's
a person who was on
Yeah.
scene at the tragedy and took pictures, and he or she, I guess I assume it's a he, rather than isolating that image and crediting the tweeter as they should have, just because there was no need. Clearly, as you said, the producer started clicking through. The one thing I found interesting was on Monday there was, of course, a small earthquake in Los Angeles, and many of us have seen the video of the team, and I think it was clearly scary, but I think they handled it very professionally. And the shock on their face, I never thought I would see a journalist or a local news team more shocked, and that was upstage the next day.
That's very true, and that was I love that video. Watching them, quickly jumped under their desks and. Yeah, that was definitely more a shock.
Well, and to your point about citizen journalism, that's exactly right, which is why citizen journalism is fraught with peril for professionals. Granted, everybody's got a cell phone now with a camera, and so video can be taken, and it's great stuff because you can't have your cameras everywhere. But by the same token, you then have to get it into the professional system where we vet it a little bit and we edit it a little bit. And to the extent that they didn't do that here, that's where the system failed.
Don't scroll through pictures on Twitter. That's just our lesson.
I just
just find that picture.
And that's like 101. Like, you're not even in Seattle. You're not. Your station isn't even located in Seattle. You should be extra careful of where these photos are coming from.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, and that was, while that was a breaking story, it wasn't live footage, as I recall, right? It did get sent to them, so there was an opportunity to at least examine it.
I think so, yeah.
The other lesson is don't use Carlos Danger as a source.
I don't know, just...
We can all have our own pseudonyms.
I know.
On that note, that's a good lesson for the day. That's all the time we have today. Thanks for watching, and make sure you chime in on the comments. For Press Party and Suffolk University, I'm Katie Eastman. We'll see you next week.